Account-based marketing, or ABM, continues to gain popularity. B2B marketing and sales teams that operate in high-involvement commercial processes put more and more emphasis on ABM. Recently, I had the opportunity for an in-depth interview with Neil Berry, Global Account-Based Marketing Director with Capgemini. Here is what we covered. It's great that we apparently have been having some sort of the same career, having been with Capgemini and Fujitsu at least
Yeah,
part of our
yeah,
careers.
yeah. It was I can't remember how long ago it was now at Fujitsu, but I really enjoyed Fujitsu actually because I left Capgemini and went to Fujitsu straight after. They kind of poached me because I had those three letters in my CV that they were very appealed by, which was ABM, and it was yeah, something that um, they were trying to dabble more in. Um, and because I'd already been doing some of it at Capgemini and obviously being a competitor at the time, it was really appealing.
Yeah, because Capgemini really seems to have had quite a long history when it comes to ABM. I mean, back in the days when I was still with Capgemini, we did our sort of first efforts, and this was back in 2006, I believe, 2005, six. Can you
Yeah,
relate to that? Is that the same picture across the channel, but
yep,
also internationally?
yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I was on an account for the Ministry of Defence in the UK at the time, and they basically said, "We're trying this new thing called account-based marketing. Do you want to give it a go?" And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." I was young and wanted to try something new. I was actually a techie at the time, so I was an Oracle applications analyst, and they said, "Look, it's." They said, "Look, we know you've got an interest in marketing. Is it something you'd like to help us with?" So I couldn't really say no.
Hmm, good
But
for
yeah,
you.
it's been quite a while that Capgemini have been doing it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned, you had the three-letter acronym already in your CV when you were approached again by Fujitsu and asked to join them. Uh, what would you consider to
Mhm.
be the definition of ABM? I mean, is it just about the marketing to a segment of one, or is it more specific?
I think it's so ABM to me is defined in a few different ways nowadays. A lot of people are seeing ABM as it's almost like it's just a way of doing marketing now. It's become more of the norm. And a lot of people are labeling ABM that for me isn't necessarily true ABM from a purist point of view. Um, And a true ABM to me is when it's one account targeted one to one. You truly understand the depth of that customer, and you are a critical part and strategic part of that account team. That, for me, is what a proper ABM is. Um, However, it's not always that way. It's also now being considered as things like the one-to-many ABM, where you get a technology that basically allows you to be able to target thousands of accounts at once with a very slightly tweaked or a very different, different approach to each of them. But for me, that it's just good marketing. It's just industry marketing. It's not necessarily ABM as such. So it depends on who you speak to. But for me, it's always been the one-to-one as the purest view is that's always been my yeah, that's always been mine.
Right, right. And would you say that ABM really, account-based marketing, is some sort of a misnomer? Because when looked at it holistically, of course, it's also about account-based marketing, sales, and customer success.
Yeah, it's got to be across the business. So you can't do ABM without other elements of the business. So part of my strategy is it basically has like ABM in the middle, and then all these different connection points, because having been at Capgemini, you'll understand this challenge. But what we tend to do is we go, okay, I'm in industry marketing, I'm going to target that client. I'm in a region and I'm going to target that client. I'm in ABM and I'm going to target that client. I'm a product marketer and I'm going to target that client. That client's sat in the middle with the most confusing view of who Capgemini are. And that's the bit that ABM should solve, right? It should almost act like a filter where if we really care about that client and that account, then we should be able to look at it and go, this is who we are to you based on our defined story. And that's where it's that critical part of bringing everybody on that journey is super important.
Mm. Yeah, I quite like that perspective because it's really truly customer centric and starting off with the customer because you would say from the from the perspective of looking outside in that criteria like a high involvement uh, buying process, a high
Yeah.
CLV or a high customer lifetime value and a long-term relationship, that those are the key criteria for applying ABM, yes or no. But you really are taking it from a
Yeah.
caring perspective, from a customer centricity perspective, right?
Oh, totally. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering,
You've got
Neil.
to be.
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
No, no, go for it. I was just saying you've got to take that kind of client first perspective because most companies always look at it at a self perspective first, whereas I've always come from a point of I've sat on accounts, I've been in an accounts, I've been an account manager. You've got to look at the client first before you then say, this is what I want to sell to you.
Right, right. And from a Capgemini perspective, the accounts that you are applying, that you as a company are applying, and you as a ABM lead globally are applying ABM too. Are you seeing that your key competitors are playing the same game pretty much, or
Mhm.
is that still quite different across the board?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a I always say that ABM is in a world where we're all sort of fighting for personalization. And
Hmm.
we're all kind of going, hey, look how relevant we are, look how relevant we are. And it's not necessarily the case because sometimes you could take a messaging or a piece of, a piece of content and you could change the logo in it and it could be exactly the same. Doesn't matter. So it's just about kind of making sure that it's really the right people and using that personalization to stand out versus just doing it because everybody else is doing it. You need to have a reason to speak to people.
Right, right. Now, I can remember that back in the days when I was still with Capgemini, one of the elements of an ABM campaign that we launched, just one element was that our CFO actually wrote or drafted a handwritten letter to the CFO at one of our key accounts. I believe it was Philips. But what would you say are, one or two really best practices that you've uncovered in your career as an account-based marketing lead?
At a tactical level.
Yeah, it could be a strategic level as well, but some sort of insight
Hmm.
that could be inspiring to viewers of this interview. That really
Yeah.
are next level, so to speak.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can go, and this is part of the challenge and the passion for ABM really is the fact that you can be more creative. Um, I've seen loads of things. Like I've done everything from virtual reality to holograms and all the way down to a simple, one page document that just absolutely got the messaging on the money at the right time for the right person. So I think it varies completely. And one of my favorite pieces was actually one that we did that was It was a one pager targeted at a newly appointed COO. And we kind of went, look, this person has never experienced our brand before. So this is a fresh slate. Let's go in and put our best foot forward. And we needed to explain the history of the account, where we'd been, what we'd done. We also wanted to explain how we're performing right now, and also where we wanted to go in our vision for our partnership. And those vision documents, whether it be a video, an infographic, or anything like that, are often the most inspiring pieces that people enjoy working on and enjoy engaging with. Because you can do it in so many different ways. This one page that we created had a QR code in the middle that when they scanned it, the infographic in the middle came alive on their phone, and it was all done through augmented reality. But we could also trace the fact that they'd clicked on it and engaged. So you get that kind of ROI on the back of it as well. And
Hmm.
it was things like that that allow you to see the experience of what someone's going through is super valuable as a marketer. Like when we had, like I said, I had clients ultimately sat on like virtual reality headsets, experiencing the future world of their business that we'd created and designed as a marketing department to say, this is what we think you can do as a business. So
Hmm.
working with sales, finding what that looks like, telling it in a story and putting it in a compelling tactical delivery that ultimately had I think they had the CIO and the CEO of a large a large consumer products company sit in the seat and put their headset on and come off and go, that was really cool. I really like that. And it was just the smile afterwards and the reactions that you get from ABM are often so personal that that's where you get the most gratification, which is why I've always enjoyed doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of because these examples really are quite striking, and I can imagine that the sheer enthusiasm that stems from that engagement is quite motivating for you
Yeah.
and for the team working on ABM. But when it comes to decision making as to will we continue to invest in ABM, how do you uh, make clear the actual ROI of these kind of campaigns and these kind of approaches versus a less sort of customer intimate approach?
Yeah, so there are, because the thing you've got to consider with ABM is actually you've got to consider the customer's buying journey first.
Hmm.
So a lot of clients will be not be in a phase where you can do this kind of super personalized, really hyper relevant piece until the end. And sometimes they're just not there. It's about giving them the epiphany of the challenge they've got, and it's taking them step by step through the point where they go, well, who are you? How do you tie into my business? How do you understand us? What are the things we've got to do? So I think there's quite a bit really that you can really start to focus on that will allow you to map that journey out to say, okay, well, at a brand level, this is what you need to know about us. And we know that you have these problems. And you can do that at quite a much broader level, and you can cover a number of accounts with that as well. And it does help. It does really help because it provides industry knowledge and shows that you understand the situation that they're in. It's an empathy point of view.
Hmm. Yeah, or to put it differently, how is at the Capgemini level, is there a broad consensus and commitment to ABM? Yes, this is the way forward, or is there some sort of a cyclical sort of discussion as to, should we go all out on ABM, yes or no, if you see what I mean? Because that tends to be the sort of
Yeah.
nature of the
So
business.
at a program level, yeah, at a program level, it's I think I think a lot of people are really bought into ABM. They kind of see the benefit. It's where the rubber hits the road when it comes to marketing because you're closest to the client and everybody wants to go towards that route. So yeah, so there's never really a challenge around investment of ABM in terms of time and effort. Um, as in most companies, there's always kind of the budgetary challenges around how do you maximize your budget to get that ROI. And you think about it at levels way above my head, but they'll be looking at it and going, where do we really channel our efforts? Because we can't forget brand has to happen. We can't forget partners has to happen. We can't forget regions has to happen, as do industries, does ABM. So
Mhm.
it's kind of building this funnel of priorities, and I think because ABM is always, or like say, at that sharp end of the stick, it always kind of comes down to that point of, right, how can we just do these things really well in ABM?
Mhm.
So I know a lot of people running a lot of other ABM programs at other companies, whether they be competitors, partners, or completely different companies themselves, and they're all in the same boat. We're all doing the same thing of trying to find the right way to maximize the investment that you're getting from sales, but the business as a whole.
Right. And Neil, what would you consider to be one of the most commonly made mistakes, or what are the common pitfalls when it comes to effectively applying ABM?
That's a good question. I think one of the most common pitfalls is it's going to sound really weird, is saying yes. So I think some of the best ABMers I've ever met have the strength to say no because they know that they're doing right by the client. You can often get sidelined by trying to stick to just what your company wants versus what the client wants. In ABM, you've got to have that client-centric view first. And when you're setting up a program, you're setting it up with the view of what the company needs to achieve from it, but with the outcome of driving growth with that client to make it and embrace it and engage with you as an organization. So the I suppose the common pitfall is looking too much at yourself because that's where you've got to start, and then continuing that through the journey. So at some point there has to be a turning point at which you go, I now have to look more at my client than myself.
Mm, that makes sense. That makes sense. That when it comes to pitfalls, when it comes to applying marketing automation, quite often what I've seen is that B2B companies, first of all, purchase the software, Marketo, HubSpot, what have you,
Mhm.
before having the conditions for success in place, before they've nailed their total addressable market, their ICP, their buyer personas, a content calendar,
Mm.
their actual commercial process, what have you. When it comes to selecting and deploying ABM software, what would you say are the sort of critical conditions to do that effectively?
Yeah, I think actually what you said, I agree with what you said, by the way, but I think there's also, before that, there's also the step of looking at how that connects with your existing stack, because there are so many times that and I've been guilty of it, everybody has, where you buy something because you go, right, this is going to solve this problem, rather than solving for the bigger problem of, I need to do these things. What's the right stack to address all of that at a strategic level versus a tactical level? So I think a lot of the times, and I've described it as a Franken stack a few times, but where you almost bolt these different tools on and it makes this monster of a machine that then doesn't necessarily, the left arm doesn't communicate with the right leg, and it becomes very, very difficult for it to communicate and work properly. And then you end up looking at it and going, oh, where do I start now? And you almost have to strip it right back to then start again. So I think actually the strategic value of what do you need from your stack first is the critical bit. And then, things like the content, the calendars, everything else then comes on top of that. So identifying the goals of what you're trying to do as a program first has to be number one priority. And then it comes into, once you know those goals, what is it that you really want to get out of it, and how are you going to build to assess that?
Right. And I quite like that term, by the way, the Frankenstack. Never heard that, but I'm gonna use that with your permission, Neil. That's great. And
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
and when it comes to the Capgemini ABM tool, have you selected
Hmm.
a global, I presume, tool, or is that a specific per region?
So I don't believe there is a global ABM tool available on the market at all. I think it's a massive gap. We've got lots of tools that all do ABM type stuff,
Hmm.
but there is no single tool that does ABM. And I think that's the bit that makes ABM really interesting as well, actually, because there's a huge human element to what we do. Um, and I think that's the bit that for me there is no global ABM tool, and I'm happy to be told otherwise if somebody's out there that can say, actually, this is what a global ABM tool looks like. I'd love to hear it because I think there's a big opportunity in the market there where tools can come together and go, right, this is what it looks like as a package for
Hmm.
you to be able to answer these problems and these challenges rather than us having to bolt it all together internally.
Right. And I mean, presumably LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a tool that one can use for ABM purposes, but can you just shed a little light as to, some of the tools that you guys have been putting together as part of your ABM
Yes.
stack?
From the MarTech stack point of view, so we have obviously we utilize things like LinkedIn, we utilize things like the programmatic web advertising platforms. Yeah, there's loads of them. You've got things like Demandbase and Terminus and other tools like that. We've also got tools like obviously a CRM. We've got automation as well in place, and we've also got quite exciting. We've got kind of these personalized documentation platform that you can edit and tweak and change and personalize content, but also get some engagement statistics around, who's looking at what, who's filling in forms, and getting some of that insight as we're going. But we're building out, and I think it's something that we'll likely look at over the coming years to look at, like I said, at a more broader level about what do we really need versus what kind of feels like the right thing right now. So it's something we'll start to assess certainly further down the line.
Right. Right. And when it comes to, you already touched upon the topic of personalization, and there's, with
Mm,
the advent of AI, there's talk of, personalization, of course, going next level with perhaps even, 10,000 or 100,000 versions of the homepage. And just to give one example, or a very personalized newsletter, which is
mhm.
sent out based on, ideal time of the recipient, etc. What kind of level of personalization are you as a team already touching upon in your ABM efforts?
So I've come in and ultimately trying to shape strategic ABM to be at a storytelling level for one account at once and one particular buying group within that account at a time. So taking them together and saying, this is exactly what we mean to you when we talk about these things. So we're being very specific. But we're also doing it grouped in kind of slightly larger groups 4 to 5, where we're targeting them at an industry level as well. So we're kind of doing a mixture of the two. You've got to blend it a little bit and to be able to get the value that the business needs from the program that you run.
Right. Now, I'm actually quoting this insight from Gartner, where thanks to ABM, they drove, for instance, a 45% increase in click-through on their advertising, a 25%
Mm,
increase in win rate, a 28% in deal velocity, but also a 70% decrease in opportunities created. And just to zoom in on the latter, um,
mm.
do you relate to that the decrease of the number of opportunities is actually a good thing, or because it sounds counterintuitive?
I think it's predominantly down to one, we're being more focused, therefore you got to be more selective in terms of the deals that you're actually going for.
Right.
And I think people are getting smarter with being able to not just go sell, 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 sell. They're just going, actually, we're better hunting with a spear than a net. It's about going in, going for that one big piece that you know you can get and you know you can deal with, versus trying to go out and be everything to everybody.
Right.
I think there's also a behavior from the client side as well. So there's a statistic flying around the fact that there is 33% of most deals now are on hold. So actually a lot of deals at the moment where they're long term, most of our deals are very long cycles. Some take 3 months, some take 3 years. Because there's such a long-term cycle, you've kind of you will always see that these deals will suddenly go, we're just going to stop for a bit. We'll think about it and then we'll come back to it. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of deals that are on hold as well. So actually, I think that as well is driving a behavior of going, well, actually, it's where we really do need to be more focused because otherwise, it's time, energy, and money from both sides.
Right. So it really is all about quality over quantity.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Quality over quantity, right? And
Hmm.
of course, AI is the buzzword these days. What do you consider to be, looking at the twin side of ABM and AI, what do you consider to be the sort of next big thing or the upcoming big thing when it comes to applying AI to ABM?
I actually think that the next big thing, certainly from a Gen AI point of view, actually, I think a lot of the Gen AI that we're going to lean towards is going to be more human enabled anyway. Because you've got to have the human at the heart of Gen AI to make it work. If you're not doing that, again, it comes back to the point I'm making earlier, how do you differentiate in a world of differentiation? If everybody's using Gen AI, we'll all end up with the same answers.
Mm.
Um, so actually, for me, and there was someone at the Martechopia conference in the UK that was speaking about the use of AI. And actually, I think the most common way of using AI nowadays is going to be, certainly in the upcoming years, it's going to be about the practicalities of your day-to-day working life. So how do I, make sure that I've got all the information and data to schedule my day out? How do I make sure that I've got everything I need to build a map out for my team to make them more proactive and efficient? And it's all of these efficiency gains that AI is going to help us to do to just be more practical and get more out of our own time versus spending, 3 hours a day looking at your calendar trying to adjust what you're doing to be able to then find some time to do the job, right? There's certain things that really are going to help, and I think it's probably going to impact us more at a practical level first, and then it will expand. I think we've seen the huge boom of Gen AI, and everyone's gone, oh, designers are going to be out of a job, writers are going to be out of a job,
Mhm.
marketers are going to be out of a job. It's just not going to get there quickly. That takes such a long time. And I don't think it will ever take over our jobs because you still need the human at the heart of it to go, that isn't right. We need specialists and we need people that understand it to comprehend what machines are ultimately generating.
Right. And Neil, final question. When it comes to the post-cookie era, what approach would you recommend to B2B marketeers these days to stay on top of key accounts without the use of cookies?
Mm. Yeah, so I think that cookies really have been highly beneficial to the large scale ABM work, right? So the one to many, some of the one to few, but actually at one to one level, we've always had to manage with some of the systems that we've already got. So the data tracking and the customer journey tracking, that type of stuff is always something we've had to do battle with. It's just another step towards actually giving and doing right, really, giving the customer the option to choose what they want to do and what you can do. And it's making us have to be smarter with how we behave. And that's one of the nice things. That's why I love B2B. I think we've got to think so smartly about the way we approach clients, because otherwise it comes across too obvious, too blatant, too tracked. And it's a very different world to B2C where you can do that and get away with it. Whereas actually B2B world is totally different. So I think for us, it's probably going to impact us a little bit because we're going to lose some of that data tracking that we've just started to gain. But there will always be another step. There's always going to be the next thing that comes along that allows us to just keep tabs on where we're going.
Right, right. So from that perspective, I suppose that would you agree with me that demand generation, actually thought leadership are becoming more and more important to stay on to stay basically on the radar of your prospects and customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been saying content is king for years, and it's still true. You still need to be able to have the right content to lead into things. But I think demand generation, interestingly, there's a company I worked at that switched off demand generation, completely turned it off, and the sales team didn't even notice. And this is the thing, like there's certain elements of demand generation that you can do when you need it. Yeah, and I think that's when you know that the pipe is falling short and you need to start to fill it. And it's having a clear process around it. But demand really will come from so many different areas. It will come from brand, it will come from channel partners, it will come from all these different areas of your business.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily purely defined as demand anymore because there's
Right.
so much that fills that pipe.
Yeah, from dark social, as it's currently referred to, the good old word of mouth.
Yeah.
But by the way, I really like your background, with the pirates and the pirate shirt. Is that a reference to growth hacking, or is it any other hobby that you're having?
No, no, this is for baseball. So I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think it probably says a lot about who I am. I've got like data and numbers thrown at you every minute of the game. So yeah, I love the game. Play it in the UK, which is pretty rare, but it's yeah, it's fantastic sport. I absolutely love it. So that explains the background. It's the only room in the house I was allowed to decorate, so I thought I'd make it my own little man cave.
Good, good on you. Okay, Neil.
Cool.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time today.
No
Yeah,
worries.
let's stay in touch, and I wish you all the best in your IBM endeavors.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Paul. Speak soon.
Speak soon. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.